coming to wait for the apparitions?
It varied over time, but there could be a lot of people in attendance. There are pictures of absolutely very large crowds. The accounts which we have indicated that the area around the church was filled up for blocks with people, and it could take hours to get close to the church. I even have one report of a Muslim clergyman physically carrying a Christian doctor to help him get close, since he was having trouble walking with the pressure of the crowd. Here's Father Johanna Yassa, who is a priest at St. Mary's Church in Zaytun today, as he introduces a clip with some motion video from the time, so you can get a sense of what the crowd was like if you're watching the video version of the podcast.
If only you were there to hear tens of thousands coming from different places, groups, and different religions were all raising their voices in songs of praise.
Meanwhile, Eric Willett writes,
There were only a few witnesses the first day, as it was a completely unexpected event. It eventually grew to a very large gathering. Nil interviewed a witness stating that there were about 100 people on the night of 13 April 1968. Nelson estimated that there was between 1,000 and 1,500 people on 15 April 1968. After that, the phenomenon was discussed for the first time in the mainstream press through the 23rd April 1968 article in the Arabic language newspaper Watani. The crowd grew significantly. The Bishop Athanasius estimated that there were 100,000 people on the night of 29-30 April. It finally reached an estimated 250,000 nightly onlookers after a few weeks, according to Johnston. By the end of 1968, it was estimated that the crowd was down to 10,000 people nightly. By June 1971, there were only a handful of people, according to Zaki. It should be noted that it is notoriously difficult to estimate properly the size of a crowd, especially at night, and the higher figure might have been overestimated. However, this provides a good illustration that the phenomenon was a very public event.
And it was a very public event. By some estimates, over 1 million people witnessed the apparitions. Even if that number is overestimated on the high side, it's still true that a very, very large number of people saw the apparitions, as is evident from the photos of the crowds that attended.
What were the apparitions like? What kind of phenomena did people experience at them?
Eric Willett surveyed a bunch of different sources. I've read many of them too. And on Willett's parasociology blog, he provides a good summary of what they say. So we'll be using his summary of the sources as a basis for describing what people experienced. Basically, Willett says,
There were 6 main qualitative aspects that can be identified about the Zaytun events. A. The so-called light birds. B. The smell of incense. C. The clouds. D. Phosphorescent-like luminosity. E. The scintillating lights or stars. And F. The main luminescent object, that is, the apparition.
So we'll go through each of these 6 categories and provide more detail on what people experienced.
The first of the categories was the so-called birds made of light. What should we know here?
One of the bishops that Pope Kyrillos tasked with looking into Zaytun was Bishop Gregorius, who was Bishop of Scientific Research and Coptic Culture. And I love how they have a Bishop of Scientific Research. I think that's awesome. I found a clip of him describing the so-called birds, and here's what he had to say.
The late Bishop Gregorios, during a private interview, told of doves the size of angels that would appear and disappear over the church.
Before they disappeared, they dispersed like cotton.
Bishop Gregorios saw many doves at many different times over the church.
Sometimes there were 7, sometimes there were 12, and they were in a formation.
Meanwhile, summarizing multiple sources, Willette writes,
Many witnesses reported that there were luminous objects that traveled through the sky of Zaytun, which were at first construed as birds, but were clearly not birds. Their actual nature remains unknown to this day. They were described as follows. Another phenomenon witnessed by the spectators is the appearance of bird-like creatures before, during, and after the apparitions, and sometimes on nights when there is no apparition at all. These creatures in some ways resemble doves. They are larger than doves. They are larger even than pigeons. Whence they come or whither they go, no one can determine. It is known, says the keeper of the Cairo Zoo, that pigeons do not fly at night, but these can hardly be any kind of natural bird. First of all, they fly much too rapidly. They fly without ever moving their wings. Only one spectator interviewed thought he saw one bird flap its wings. They seem to glide before, into, and around the apparitions. They never come to rest on the roof or trees, and on some occasions have been seen to disintegrate in the sky like wisps of cloud. Varying in number on different nights, they have appeared singly, in twos, threes, and even larger groups. Always in some kind of formation, the creatures fly in the form of a triangle, sometimes in the formation of a cross. Once, 12 of them flew 6 abreast in 2 rows. Not only are these birds spotless white, they themselves emit light. They are like electrically illuminated birds which can be seen both in the brilliant light of the apparition and in the darkness of the sky above the apparition. They disappear as mysteriously as they appear and without sound of any kind. Another description is from Bishop Gregorius on the apparitions that took place between 27 April and 15 May 1968. Before the apparitions took place, some birds that look like pigeons, I don't know what they are, appear in different formations. Sometimes 2 appear on the dome, just as if they had come out of it. However, the dome is closed. The windows do not open. They might be seen flying eastward, then wheeling about and flying to the west, and while one watches them, they suddenly disappear.
And the fact that the windows of the dome do not open, they are sealed shut, is important because it means that the birds of light could not be released from within the dome. That's also something you could tell by examining the inside of the church, because the dome is 50 feet above the floor and there is no structure under it that you could stand on. You'd have to put up scaffolding or big ladders to get up there, and that would have been obvious if anybody had tried that, apart from the fact the windows don't open. 2 of the phenomena that were described as accompanying the apparition were the smell of incense and clouds around the church. According to Willette,
Palmer reported that one should perhaps include as lights the mysterious clouds that are sometimes seen to hover high above the church even when the rest of the sky is cloudless. On one night, Bishop Gregorius stated, there poured from the sealed stained glass windows of the high dome such clouds of incense that it would take millions of censers to produce a like quantity. The incense clouds settled over the throng standing around the church.
so these clouds were seen above the roof of the church, near the dome, but they couldn't have come out of the dome because its windows are sealed shut and don't open. Also, as we noted, you'd need scaffolding to get up there.
Baylis adds a few more details in noting that he, Bishop Gregorius, describes the appearance of clouds of deep reddish incense which billowed in huge quantities. It rose to a height of 30 to 60 feet and was clearly visible above and around the church against the colorless sky. Author Pearl Zaki described that sometimes clouds like a thick fog would roll in towards the church as if they were being channeled down the streets in all directions to completely cover the church. They seemed to absorb the incense and its fragrance and carry it to the crowd of people and spread it over them like a canopy. The sky above would turn a deep reddish purple. She also added that it was a pleasant fragrance.
So, according to Pearl Zaki, the clouds were sometimes seen coming from the streets and gathering around the church.
Michael Nill interviewed Father Boutros, the parish priest of Zaytun, in 1978. He noted that there was at various occasions clouds accompanied with thunder and a smell of incense. Finally, in an interview in 1980, a witness, Mona McHale, told Baylis that other times we used to see clouds of incense. First, you would see a type of white cloud, and it would cover all the church, all the area surrounding the church from above. I never smelled anything like it in all my life. It was a very, very beautiful odor. The cloud remained for 10 or 15 minutes and disappeared.
So the clouds did not remain very long, just 10 to 15 minutes, and then they dissipate. The witnesses also reported displays of a kind of diffuse light that didn't take a particular shape, but that did illuminate the church.
Another common qualitative description was some sort of glowing aura or phosphorescent-like luminosity in the sky and around the church. Palmer reported that the large dome atop the church is sometimes illuminated by the heavenly lights, and on one occasion, as described by Bishop Samuel, the light which poured out from beneath one of the smaller domes gradually covered the entire church in light. Michel Nill, from his 1978 interviews, was told by Regai Lewis that he saw the church illuminated from above as if it was from a fluorescent light, while Victor Fakhri described the same phenomenon as a phosphorus light on the church's wall and dome. As well, witness Sami Gubran described a very strong light as if it was 1,000,000 of watts emanating from the church and lighting up the entire neighborhood.
In addition to the diffuse glow, light also sometimes appeared as small points, which were described by witnesses as sparkles and stars. It also reportedly sometimes looked like a flame.
The main apparition was oftentimes preceded by sparkling lights. As Palmer noted, the lights have been described by spectators as a circle of bright spotlights on one occasion, as falling stars on another occasion, and even as a shower of diamonds of light swirling in the path of Our Lady's movements. A brilliant crown all of lights has been seen over the figure of Our Lady, giving her a majestic and glorious appearance. Berzaki witnessed a similar phenomenon, as she wrote that, on my fifth night, at about 4:15 a.m., I saw 4 yellow flashes or flames covering the front of the church. Following this, about 4:30, the Virgin Mary appeared full figure. She added in a different text, again, I saw a flash of yellowish-orange light shaped like a big flame and covering the whole front of the church and lasting about 5 seconds. It was repeated twice, 4 times in all. Hilda Gubran told Michel Nill in 1978 that at the time of the apparitions there were stars and pigeons associated with the apparitions. Anzi Morid told Baylis in a 1981 interview that he saw sparkling lights prior to the apparition in April 1968.
Finally, there was the apparition itself, the figure of the woman that was interpreted as the Virgin Mary. We have many eyewitness accounts of what people saw, and I was able to find a number of them on video. Here is what Bishop Marcos had to say.
Just behind the church, in front of the wall of the church, I think, not more than 40 or 50 meters, approximately at midnight. I have seen the vision complete, very nice, very clear. I saw the complete face, complete body, and her hands waving to bless the people. And everyone could see that she concentrated her eyes on them exactly.
Notice that Bishop Marcos indicates that he and others could see the Virgin's eyes, which is a rather small detail. Now, here is what Father Johanna Yassa, now one of the priests at St. Mary's in Zaytun, had to say.
A few days later, while I was standing with my friend Mukhtar Fikri from the Faculty of Engineering, we saw the Virgin Mary surrounded by a stunning orange light. We saw her many times at the northeastern dome. She appeared in many different phenomenal forms. Once she was standing in her full body, blessing the people. She was moving from one dome to another, then going towards the cross.
Here is what the evangelical Protestant theologian Otto Menardus, who got his PhD at Harvard University, had to say.
Well, it occurred during the first days of April that thousands and 10,000s of people, both Muslims and Christians alike, assembled in front of the Church of the Holy Virgin to see the apparition of the Virgin Mary as she appeared there on the dome. 2 days later, large numbers of people, both Muslims and Christians of the various denominations, assembled there and witnessed the apparition in various forms. I myself saw it numerous times with friends in my parish, with university students, and yes, there's to be no doubt about it.
And finally, here is what Dr. Hairi Malek, a physician, reports.
I was standing over there near the fence and holding that iron fence as strong as I could because of the pressure of the crowd. And it was about 8:30 in the evening, and I saw a light coming out from the this dome, which is the southwest dome, and the light began to increase gradually, and then suddenly the Holy Mother was standing in front of the dome. She stood there for about 15 minutes, and then she began to walk, and she stood in front of that cross, and she knelt and stood up again, and then she walked to the northern side of the church, just above the area where I was standing, and she looked at the crowd, and she blessed them, and she smiled, and I can say that I saw her teeth when she smiled.
Dr. Hairi says that he saw the Virgin standing, walking, kneeling, and then standing up again and walking, which is purposeful behavior. He also says that he could see Mary's teeth, which is a very fine detail. Summarizing different sources, Eric Willett says,
one obvious aspect about the apparitions is that there was a fairly wide variety of descriptions and behaviors reported by the witnesses. The apparitions seem to have all occurred near the church, but not necessarily at the exact same spot. As previously noted, the first one was seen on the roof near the base of the dome. It was also seen in the courtyard between trees, while in other occasions it was seen in midair above the dome.
It's significant that the apparition was not confined to a single spot. The apparition was seen on the roof of the church, on the ground in the courtyard, and floating in the air above the church. That means that whatever the explanation was, it needs to be able to account for all three of these locations. And the public authorities took steps to try to rule out a hoax. You'll recall that on the first night, they broke nearby streetlights to rule out those as a source of the light. Well,
it is interesting to note that after a number of days of apparitions, the public utilities cut the power in the neighborhood, at first to deflect a hoax, and then to help having a better view. As well, surrounding trees were cut on the third night so people could see better. The most common colors were blue and white, but some noted also green and pink, and others saw a reddish light. These are important elements to define the nature of the apparition, as the traditional colors associated with Marian devotion are blue and white, but also red, although more common in older and Eastern iconography. Several witnesses underlined that apparition disappeared as if turning off slowly the dimmer of a lamp, while in other situations it rose in the sky to disappear. On some occasions it was perceived as if the wind was blowing through it and that her veil was moving in the wind, while it appeared to be flat and only two-dimensional on another occasion. At times the apparition was motionless and described as statue-like, but it appeared that it was moving, more often than not, but as if floating without using its feet. It was making gestures with her head and her hands in particular.
these gestures were commonly understood by witnesses as the Virgin Mary blessing the people.
Many claim to be able to distinguish a face, eyes, and mouth, and even resembling representations seen in religious icons. Yet others noted that there was a light, but they could not distinguish anything particular. As one would expect, it is normal to have variations in descriptions provided by eyewitnesses, but in general, it tends to be relatively consistent. This certainly adds some degree of confidence about the common and ongoing source of the event.
So that's a general summary gathered from multiple sources of what the witnesses experienced during the apparitions. The American anthropology professor Cynthia Nelson learned about the apparitions in mid-April, about 2 weeks after the first apparition, and she attended the events several times. She describes what she saw.
When I looked to where the crowds were pointing, I too thought I saw a light through the branches of the trees. And as I tried to picture a nun-like figure in those branches, I could trace the outline of a figure. But as I thought to myself that this is just an illusion of the light reflecting through the branches, the image of the nun would leave my field of vision. Still, there was no doubt in my mind that there was a light, and that if I looked for the image, it would come into focus. I immediately explained this perceptual experience as an illusion caused by reflected light. But the source of the light was a mystery, for the streetlights had been disconnected all around the church for several days. And within another week, all the trees around the church would be cut.
Of course, with all this going on, the apparitions were a major news story. They were being reported extensively in the Arabic language press, both newspapers and magazines, particularly in Egypt. They were even being reported in newspapers around the world, including the New York Times and the British Telegraph. Locally, the crowds for the apparitions were growing, and they reportedly topped out at an estimated 250,000 people present for a single apparition. Some of the apparitions lasted just a few minutes, but one reportedly lasted for 2 hours and 15 minutes, which happened to be on the day that they cut the power in the neighborhood. Father Johanna reports,
Some people said this may be the result of light reflections, which is why they cut off the electricity from the whole area at dawn on April 30th, 1968. On that day, the apparition lasted for 2 hours and 15 minutes.
even before that, Pope Kyrillos VI had quickly appointed a commission to study the apparitions as soon as they began to be reported, which is the same thing that would be done in the Catholic Church. When an apparition is reported and needs to be investigated, the local bishop is tasked with doing so, and he typically appoints a commission of experts to research it and deliver their findings to him, after which he makes a decision based on their research. We talked about that in episode 84 on private revelations, and you can go back and listen to that if you'd like more information about how private revelations work in the Catholic Church. Pope Kyrillos appointed 3 archpriests known in the Coptic Church as hegumens. And yes, the word hegumen is related to the Greek term for governor, meaning that they had supervisory duties over other priests. These 3 were the director of the papal cabinet, the secretary of the papal committee for churches affairs, and the secretary of His Holiness Pope Kyrillos. So they were very trusted and respected men. They came back with positive findings, which we'll quote later. And on Saturday, May 4th, 1968, the Patriarchate held a press conference that was attended by more than 150 reporters. Overseeing the press conference were 4 bishops: Bishop Athanasius of Beni Suef, Bishop Abraham of Fayum, Bishop Samuel, the General Bishop of Social Services, and Bishop Gregorius, Bishop of Scientific Research and Coptic Culture. Bishop Athanasius read and translated the statement of the Patriarchate, which we present here in full, including dates on the Coptic calendar.
Since the evening of Tuesday, April 2nd, 1968 AD, which coincides with Bahram Hat 24, 1684 AM, the apparition of the Virgin Mary, the Mother of Light, continuously occurred in the Coptic Orthodox Church after her name on Tomanbay Street at Zaytun District in Cairo. This apparition occurred on many different nights and was not yet finished. It happened in different forms, sometimes with the whole body, sometimes with the upper half surrounded by a halo of light, sometimes from the windows of the domes on the church top, and other times outside the domes. She used to move and walk above the dome and bow in front of the upper cross, which would be illuminated with a bright light. She used to face the viewers and bless them with her hands and with gestures of her holy head. Sometimes she appeared in the form of a body of a bright cloud or in the form of light preceded by the emergence of spiritual forms such as high-speed doves. The apparition would continue for a long period of time, which sometimes reached up to 2 hours and 15 minutes, as on the dawn of Tuesday, April 30th, 1968 AD, which coincides with Baramuda 22, 1684 AM. Her complete glowing figure lasted from 2:45 a.m. to 5 a.m. This apparition was witnessed by many thousands of people of different religions, faiths, denominations, and foreigners, clergy, scientists, professionals, and other groups, who affirmed certainly that they had seen her. The large numbers agreed in describing every scene in its form, location, and time with unanimous testimony, which makes the apparition of the Lady of the Virgin, the Mother of Light, in this region a distinct apparition in its character, elevating it above the need for a statement or confirmation. This apparition was accompanied by two important matters. The first was reviving the spirit of faith in God, the other world, and the saints, and illuminating the light of the knowledge of God in many who were far away from him. This led to the repentance of many and the change of their lives. The second matter was the occurrence of several wonderful miracles of healing, many of which were proven scientifically and through collective testimonies. The papal office collected information on all of the above by members and committees of priests who investigated the truth, witnessed this apparition themselves, and proved it in their reports to His Holiness Pope Kyrillos VI. The papal headquarters, in issuing this statement, affirms with full faith, great joy, and humble thanksgiving to the Almighty God that the Virgin Mary, the Mother of Light, has appeared successively in clear and consistent forms in many different nights, for varying periods, and at times for more than 2 hours without interruptions, beginning Tuesday evening, April 2nd, 1968 AD, which coincides with Baramhat 22, 1684 AM to date, at the Coptic Orthodox Church of the Virgin Mary on Toman Bay Street at Zaytun District and Al-Mataraya Road in Cairo. This is the historically proven road that the Holy Family passed through during their trips in Egypt. May God make this blessing a symbol of peace for the world and prosperity to our dear homeland and our blessed people, to whom the prophecy proceeded and said, "Blessed be Egypt, my people." Saturday, May 4th, 1968 AD, Barabuda 26, 1684 AM. The papal headquarters in Cairo.
So the apparitions that occurred between April 2nd and May 4th received official approval by the Coptic Patriarchate. Now, you may be wondering what the reaction of the Catholic Church was. Since the apparition was happening at a Coptic parish, it really wasn't the place of the Catholic Church to make an official pronouncement. But the local head of the Coptic Catholic Church, Cardinal Stephanos I, had an informal investigation conducted. And based on this investigation, he concurred with the Coptic Patriarchate. Cardinal Stephanos stated,
"It is no doubt a real appearance confirmed by many Coptic Catholic members of the highest integrity and reliability. They saw the Blessed Virgin's apparition and gave me complete details and descriptions of the appearances of the blessed apparitions on the dome of the Zaytun Church. Sister Paula de Muffalo, a Roman Catholic nun well known for her accuracy and preciseness, assured me of the certainty of the Virgin's appearance on the dome of the Zaytun Church. Sister Paula was shivering and trembling. She says that she was not the only observer, but she was among thousands of observers who all saw the apparition. This unique miracle embodies a benevolent message which will make the Zaytun Church a center of pilgrimage."
Of course, this was not an official ruling since the apparition was taking place in a Coptic parish, but it did represent Cardinal Stephanos' informed personal opinion. In his book Zaytun, 1968 to 1971, Francis Johnston writes,
"As would be expected, there was no official pronouncement on the visions from Rome, though Pope Paul VI sent 2 investigators to Zaytun who saw the apparition with their own eyes, reported in Al-Aram, 6 May 1968. There was no obligation on the part of the Holy See to pass judgment on an event which occurred in a Coptic Orthodox environment. Similarly, the Copts felt it unnecessary to pronounce on the visions of the Blessed Virgin at Fatima in 1917. In a letter to the author, Father Jerome Palmer explained that Rome might only undertake its own investigation